Back in early April, 72% of adults said that they would take a coronavirus vaccine if it were to become available. Now that number has fallen to just 51%. That, of course, is a trend that's very worrisome to health experts as the U.S. gets closer to actually releasing a COVID-19 vaccine.
And between parties, the numbers dropped significantly as well. Republicans initially at 69% early April, now down to just 47%, and Democrats down to 61% from their initial 81% in the early stages of the pandemic. Senior editor at Morning Consult, Matt Bracken, he's here to share more on why adults may be less likely to get vaccinated and some more polling updates as well. Matt, thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So, Matt, tell us about not just the vaccination trends. What are some of the worrisome trends in data, polling data, that you guys have seen in the last several months heading into this November election?
Well, I think the vaccine trends kind of serve as emblematic for larger concerns about kind of trust in the government to kind of see the country through the pandemic, and maybe more specifically trust in institutions that the public relies on to give them the most up-to-date information and really tell them, best practices for moving forward and returning to some semblance of normalcy. We see, for example, levels of trust in the Centers for Disease Control and Protection fade month by month. Certainly Democrats and Republicans in Congress, the president, the vice president. It's kind of part of a larger trend of lack of trust and faith in our leaders and getting us out of this economic and health crisis.
Well, one of the things that's interesting to me about the vaccine data is the mask wearing feelings have become very partisan, right? Republicans are more opposed to mask wearing. Democrats are more pro mask wearing. So there's been like a partisan split there. The decline in trust of an eventual vaccine seems to have happened on a bipartisan basis, however. What do you make of that?
It's really fascinating. I think during the beginning of the pandemic, we saw strong majorities across all different groups, political parties, people of all geographic regions, different income levels, basically every demographic cohort that you could come up with. Strong majorities supporting the possibility of taking a vaccine if one were to become available. Then, kind of as the pandemic dragged on, we got into late April. Those declines started to be more apparent. Then it was relatively stable over the summer. And then we saw a new dip in August. And that, I think, can be traced a little bit more clearly to partisan leanings. We've seen Democrats in particular take a big dive over the past month. And that's when you saw the president, for example, promising a vaccine multiple times, possibly before the election, certainly before the end of the year. And Democrats, beginning of the year, they were at 81% in terms of those who said they would get a vaccine if one became available. Now it's dropped all the way down to 53%. So I wrote that piece 2 weeks ago. And even in the 2 weeks that have since occurred, 8 points have since dropped off from Democrats. So Democrats and Republicans this year are pretty comparable now, 53 to 50. So I think different populations are finding different reasons to kind of lack faith in the efficacy and safety of a vaccine, but they're arriving at the same conclusion ultimately.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. Have you seen any other areas in terms of public trust that we can see declining, kind of like a horseshoe thing that's going on where both sides just don't trust our institutions?
Yeah, I mean, I think the vaccine is really the most staggering thing. Certainly the masks have been a little bit more one-sided in terms of kind of skepticism from Republicans versus Democrats who are taking a more full-throated adoption of them. We still, across the board, see Democrats more likely to prioritize the safety of COVID, whether that comes at the expense of the economy, kind of leaning into the public health impact versus economic impact. Republicans are a little more likely to be the opposite. But the vaccine question is one where there's kind of just, widespread agreement, again, even if it comes for different reasons.
Matt, thank you so much. So great to have your analysis today.
Thanks, Matt.
Absolutely. Thank you both.
And we'll have more rising for you after this.